Okay, good afternoon, morning, evening, whatever it is for wherever you are. It's so nice to see everybody, or letters that delineate everybody's name. I wanted to continue in our tradition about the controversial topics. Um, and this is another one that often strikes a very, very delicate tone. That, again, we're going to just present some issues. This may take more than one discussion. And frankly, it's likely going to raise more questions than answers. And that's really what we're going to, not try to conclude any serious conclusions, but really just raise some issues. And along the way, I think, again, use our model of inspiration for Allah to see, I think it's an inspiring process to understand the underlying ways and values that are part of the questions that are raised and the answers that are given. And we gain inspiration by that process. We're not going to get any conclusions. We're not going to get any answers to the very, very serious issues that are raised. But it's I think, inspiring in itself to understand the way in which Jewish tradition has grappled with these issues. And the issue that we're going to be talking about is something that we touched upon a little bit last week, and based on popular demand, want to expand upon, which has to do with truth-telling, specifically regarding questions of a medical nature. And the particular area that I wanted to analyze has to do with the question that is raised in a variety of different ethical contexts about to what extent are you obligated or required, or perhaps required not to, share the truth of someone's condition with a patient, when especially you have a concern as a medical practitioner that the patient maybe doesn't want to know, or it will impact the patient's outcome if they do know. So I wanted to use a couple of examples and the way we're going to try and in somewhat organized fashion to go through this topic. We're going to talk about this in two concrete examples, one from a journal that you see on the shared screen, I hope. Hopefully the screen is still shared. You see here the journal article. And then we're going to tell you a crazy, crazy story that was used in a halachic context. We'll then talk about truth-telling in general and what the Torah's value is when it comes to the concept of truth. And then we'll try and then go piece by piece using some sources to understand how this practical issue can play out. So I wanted to start with an article from a journal called the Journal of Medical Ethics. It was published here, you see, in 2001. And I'm going to just, give me a second, I'm going to stop the share so I can look into here. One moment.
I'm back. I'm not ready to hear about medicine.
Here.
Here.
Here. Okay, let's see. Share screen one. Okay, can you see the article here? Yes, you can see it. Okay. This is an article called Truth-Telling and Patient Diagnoses. And this journal article tried to raise an interesting question. And they found a fascinating baseline point, which you could agree or disagree with. How do physicians handle informing patients of their diagnoses? And how much information do patients really want? This is a very common issue that physicians or medical practitioners can deal with, where they know something about the medical status of a patient, but they are concerned that they maybe shouldn't tell that patient. Now, this study found a fascinating point of fact, and then we'll see exactly one of the things that it made. So it started with a baseline where they said, and they asked three groups. They asked nurses, they asked physicians, and they asked patients. The question of, do patients have a right to know about their condition? And indeed, their understanding was that 99% of patients said, of course I have a right to know about my condition. 99% of nurses said that. We'll get to doctors later. The same 99% of patients said that doctors have an obligation to inform the patient of their condition. 100% of nurses said that. 97% of patients said that they wanted to be told if they have a life-threatening or serious diagnosis, okay? Now, here's something interesting. Let's say, how much detail do they want to be told? So here there's a huge difference. Look at this. 62% of patients said they wanted to know all the details of what's going on in their care, about their care and about what's going on with their medical situation, but only 39% of physicians felt that. Now, it was raised when it comes to doctors versus the delta was a little bit different, doctors versus patients when it came to family, but this is a huge difference. So I just want to skip to the, because it's time, I want to skip to the discussion here. What they said was patients who participated consistently responded they have a right to know their condition, and they expect physicians to inform them, and they want to be informed if they have life-threatening illnesses. However, about a quarter of the physicians state that they inform their patients between 50 and 90% of the time. And less than half of the physician participants in the study feel that the patients want to be told all the details of their conditions. So you see two things. First of all, the doctors don't always tell everybody everything. But the second is that they misunderstood what they thought, again, just according to this study, what they thought the patients wanted. They think the patients don't want to know all the information. Patients said, yes, we do. And so you have this interesting, distinction between the position that the patients take of wanting to know and wanting, or definitely their family to know everything that's going on, and the position that doctors take. Now, why do doctors take that position? So it's interesting that they use a very interesting term here. They say the term that they used here is the physician, on the other hand, must balance his or her obligation to tell the truth against the imperative of do no harm. Right? Questions often arise concerning how much truth to tell. Sometimes the doctor says, it's going to harm this patient if I tell them everything that's really going on. And this is a conflict between benevolent paternalism on behalf of the physician and an increased interest on the part of the patient to preserve autonomy. And these are not easily resolved. So again, what you have here is a patient who wants to know everything. And you have a physician who says, as a paternalistic figure, right? A parenting kind of figure, I think that you knowing everything about your medical situation is not good for you. Now, the study ends with this, we recognize the physician has an obligation to avoid harming the patient. If the physician believes that informing the patient can cause harm, he or she will have a moral dilemma involving patient autonomy and possible harm. And here's the last. Perhaps the comment of one physician sums up the feeling of many participants in the study. I'm not the God of this patient, just a technician with an education, just by society's view of doctor's compassion who does the best he can. So this is a really interesting study that grapples with what we call truth telling, right? And what the study doesn't deal with is what you could say is a slippery slope or a fine line between withholding information or telling a lie. What happens if a patient says, doctor, tell me my test results? And the doctor feels that if he or she tells them the test results, that will be detrimental to that patient's care and cause harm. Or does the doctor even have the right to make that determination? Who are you? You're not the patient's God, as the situation, as the article said, as the study said. You have no right, and you are a technician. In which case, maybe you need to inform the patient completely. Although there's a fair amount of anecdotal evidence. I had this in the shul where there was a parent of a member who came into a doctor's office, and was there for a broken bone. And the doctor diagnosed a broken bone, figured out what was the story, and said, "Oh, by the way," as the doctor was leaving, one of the other staff says, "By the way, you have malignant bone cancer." And the patient was then so distraught that they gave up hope, and they were Nebuch had a very negative outcome because of the mental anguish that was caused by knowing this diagnosis. And the family was very upset at the doctor because the family says, "You came for a broken bone, fix the broken bone." The person didn't need to know more. And if you told them more, that is what had them lose hope, etc. So again, no answers here, but it's a very, very delicate question. And I wanted to share this approach that balances these complex issues. How does Judaism feel about this? How does halacha feel about this question of truth-telling? So I want to share with you one, if anybody has any questions so far, we haven't done any halacha stuff, but any questions so far, feel free to unmute or ask any questions or say your point, and then we'll continue. Okay. So I wanted to then pivot to a case that did happen in a Jewish hospital in Israel, where the following occurred. There was a family who had, I think 6 daughters. They had 6 daughters. Nothing I could ever understand about it. They had 6 daughters, and the wife was pregnant with baby number 7, and she came into the hospital alone without her husband, and had a beautiful, wonderful, healthy baby girl, daughter number 7. And she begins to cry, and the doctors ask her, "Well, what's going on?" And she said, "You can't tell my husband." And they said, "What do you mean?" She said, "My husband told me," this is a documented story, "my husband told me, if you come home with another girl, don't bother coming home again." The husband so desperately wanted to have a son, if you come home with another baby girl, don't come home. So the doctor, the treating physician, thought about it for a second, and then says, "Let me handle this." The treating physician calls the husband and says, "Mazel tov, your wife has given birth to a beautiful baby boy, but before you come into the room, I need you to come into my office." So the father comes into the doctor's office, and the doctor says, "Sir, I need you to sit down." He sits down, he's kind of nervous, and he says, "Yes, your wife had a baby boy, but unfortunately, the baby has a very, very terrible illness, and I'm not sure if the baby's going to survive." This is what the doctor says to the dad. The dad breaks out in sobs and says, "Oh, it's so terrible. I'm sure God is punishing me for saying this terrible thing to my wife about how desperately I wanted a daughter, how desperately I wanted a son. And then I told her that if she has another girl, shouldn't bother coming home. Such a terrible thing I've said. I'm sure God is punishing me for being such an insensitive and not nice husband." So the doctor says, "Aha! In that case, I've got news for you. Your wife actually gave birth to a healthy baby daughter." And that was the way he broke the news to the father. Now, this was brought to a halachic tribunal of if the doctor was right or was justified in making a bold-faced lie to this to this new father, with the cheshbon, so to speak, in mind, that he felt that he was acting for the greater good. So this is a kind of a different kind of medical truth-telling, where you have a physician who is actively lying, and doing so to try and, again, achieve some sort of understanding that this doctor has of what the greater good is. So it's again, a really interesting, sort of a thought model that's relevant to try and understand what is the concept of this notion of what we call truth-telling in halacha. Again, I'll pause for a second. If anybody wants to unmute to ask any questions about this case, and then we'll try and look at some examples of how we figure this out in the halacha. Okay. All right. Any questions so far? All right. So let's try and see, what do we see about this discussion in what do we see about this discussion when it comes to the halacha? Let's see. We'll get to notes here. Okay. So what we need to try and figure out is what is the approach that we should take towards truth telling in general. Where does the Torah have, their policy? What is Jewish policy on telling the truth? And you say, what are you talking about? Of course, there's no question about it. Truth is a fundamental value of Judaism. What kind of question is that? So let's analyze that for a second, because that is absolutely true. And saying anything less than that is I would say a travesty against Jewish values. But let's take a look at some examples where the Talmud deals with this. For example, the story in the 50th chapter of Sefer Bereshit talks about the story of Joseph and his brothers. Now, just to parachute in, Joseph is now the regent of Egypt. Their father has died. And what happens? Joseph says, the brothers come to Joseph and they say, you know what? Our fathers died. And we know what happened last time when a father died, when there was conflict between brothers, right? When there was Yaakov and Esav, and the father died. And what did Esav say he was going to do? Esav said he was going to kill his brother. As soon as my father dies, I'm going to kill my brother. Yosef may want to do the same thing. We were pretty bad to him. And so the brothers were very concerned. So let's see what they did. Again, hopefully you can see the screen share here. And this is the core here. Right? This is the most important. They say, hey, Yosef, before he died, our father, or your father, commanded, Yosef, so say to Yosef, Ana sana pesha achecha v'chatatan ki ra'ag malucha, v'ata sana lepesha avdei Elohei avicha, v'yef Yosef v'dabar. They say, Joseph, before he died, Dad told us to give you a message, which is, even though your brothers have done terrible things to you, like selling you to Egypt, make sure you forgive them. Sana pesha achecha v'chatasan, even though they've done terrible things to you. Now, what does Yosef do when he hears this? Yosef cries when he hears this. They all cry together, and in fact, Yosef says, don't worry, I'll take care of you. All good. Only one problem. It never happened. This conversation between Yaakov and the other brothers didn't actually occur. The brothers told a bold-faced lie to Joseph because they said, Dad commanded you to forgive us, probably making the cheshbon, so to speak, making the determination that if they quote their father, Yosef is who Yosef is of course very close with, Yosef is much more likely to be interested in following the directive. So they say, yeah, Dad commanded you to forgive us. Comes along the Talmud in the Sefer Yevamos. Amar Rabbi Elisha Moshe Be'elezer ben Shimon, mutar lo la'adam l'shanot b'dvar hashalom. Rabbi Elazar, in the name of Rabbi Shimon, says, quoted by Rabbi Elisha, it is permitted for someone to change. In this case, change is a euphemism for lie. To change, meaning to change the truth, bidvar shalom, for the sake of peace. Shene'emar, as it says, avicha tziva, the gomer, kotem liyosef anasana. Your father commanded, which he never did. And what the Talmud is suggesting here is that the brothers were justified in doing so. The brothers were justified in not telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, to enable themselves to live by the fact that they were worried that Yosef would kill them. The Talmud goes in further examples. One was the case of Shmuel, which has to do with Shmuel anointing a king. And then Rabbi Yishmael goes even further, says, Gadol Hashem, peace is so great, Shapakadosh Baruch Hu Shinabo. Even God changed. What's going on there? That goes to the story of Abraham and Sarah. When they get told as elderly people that they're going to have a child, Sarah laughs and says, how is that even possible? My husband's too old. And what does it say at the end? When God repeats the story to Abraham, God doesn't want to say, oh, your wife made fun of you. So God says, that Sarah was saying that she was too old. So you have these examples where it seems there's a very delicate balance of what I'm going to say, truth being relative. Now, this is a very slippery slope because we have an explicit pasuk in the Torah that says, midvar sheker tirchak, right? Which means don't lie. Now, it's interesting if you look carefully, just to push the envelope a little bit, the Torah doesn't say don't lie. It says distance yourself from falsehood. You could interpret that to say that this is like a super avera. The Torah didn't just say don't do it. It says not only don't do it, stay far away. Others suggest that maybe the Torah is saying midvar sheker tirchak, which means stay away from untruth. But the Torah doesn't actually, if the Torah tells you not to do something, it knows how to do so. Lo tirtzach, lo tigno, right? Thou shalt not. The Torah doesn't say thou shalt not lie, perhaps suggesting that there are situations in which there is some allowance for something other than the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And that, again, is a very, very slippery slope to deal with. Look at the Talmud in Masechet Tubot, a famous story. Tana Rabbanan, Ketzad mirakdim lifnei hakala. How should you regale a bride on her wedding day? Right? The Ketzad mirakdim lifnei hakala, that you dance in front of her. Beit Shammai say, Kala kamochi. Kala na'ava chasuda. Beit Shammai say that you should be accurate in your description. Kala kamochi. Beit Hillel say no. Kala na'ava chasuda. Na'a means beautiful. Chasuda, in this case, could either mean talking about a positive attribute or could be talking about her as veiled. But what does the Beit Shammai, Amrullah and Beit Shammai, this is where we're talking about. Amrullah and Beit Shammai, Beit Shammai say to Beit Hillel, are you going to lie? Are you going to describe her having attributes that she doesn't have? Right? You're going to talk about her if she is limp, you're going to talk about her beautiful gait. The Torah says, distance yourself from falsehood. Beit Hillel said back to Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel said, 1 second. Somebody goes to the store and they buy a bad product. And they're coming home all excited. Should you tell them, oh, you bought the ugliest sweater I could ever imagine? Or you should say, hey, no, look, nice sweater. Once they've already bought it and it's not going to be returned, And so it's a crass way of saying this family is, are you going to, focus on the negative things that are going on, or you should say, be positive. If somebody's already bought the sweater, you say, oh, beautiful. Whether or not you think it's a good or a bad thing. That there is a fundamental idea of you must act in a way that takes into account the feelings of others. Now, it's interesting because no one was ever saying Beit Shammai should scream, ugly kala. Nobody was ever thinking Beit Shammai you should dance and say negative things. But you have essentially a conflict here between ultimate truth and ultimate peace. The idea of thinking about the feelings and the experience of the other. And, the conflict between emet and shalom, right? Emet v'shalom, emet and shalom. And we say, Rabbi Chanina says, Chotamo shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the seal, so to speak, of God is the notion of truth. And yet, we say, Asur laten shalom b'beit merchatz. You can't use the word shalom in an unclean place. Shenemar v'ikra Hashem shalom, the name of God is peace. So you got to balance between this concept of peace, which we said is the name of God, or truth, which is the seal of God. Both very, very important values. So you have this issue that you need to try and balance, which is that sometimes the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth seems to not be the clear and obvious best policy in the examples that we've shown. And the question is, how could that possibly be the case? So by Dr. Aaron Levine, Alav Shalom, was a rabbi and an economist, wrote an interesting piece having to do with some of this issue. And it actually goes back to a psychologist by the name of Goffman, who talks about this concept of the dramaturgical approach to society. And what Goffman posits is that often you're, somehow in a drama, in a play, that you're on these different stages. And what truth means is what is true. Everybody plays a particular role. So for example, use the question of if someone calls and says, hey, I need your help, moving some boxes. And you say, oh, happy to help, even though you're tired and you'd rather not help, but and the actual truth would be, no, I'm tired, I'm not interested in helping you, and you're not that good of a friend anyway. All right, would that be the right way to respond? Well, in your role as an appropriate friend, the truth here is, yeah, I'll help you. I'm happy to do it. Or if somebody says, oh, thank you for coming to pick me up. And you say, oh, it was no trouble at all. Maybe it was a trouble, but the right thing to say is it was no trouble at all. Or maybe do we say, no, absolutely not. There is a concept that truth is such a fundamental value to Jewish philosophy, Jewish law, that, you are on the wrong side of history if you ever fiddle, if you ever play with the concept of truth, because especially when, it could be for, negative consequences where if you have this little loophole or opening to say that you can, not tell the truth in one way or another, that's going to lead to a very, very, big breach and negative outcomes of what people's personalities could be. That concept of, so there's a very interesting story, I'll see if I can pull it up here, of the Gemara. The Gemara talks about the story about Rav. And Rav was one of the great sages, had a very delicate appetite. Okay, here I actually have here the English. I'll bring the English over. Give me a second here. Let's see here. Here. The Gemara records a story about Rav, whose wife would always prepare dinner the opposite of his request. He would say, I want cold soup, and she would prepare hot soup. He would want hot soup, she would prepare cold soup, whatever it is. When his son Chia grew older, he figured out what his mother was doing, And so he would tell her that his father wanted A when he really wanted B. So she would serve B. He wanted hot soup. So he'd go to mom and say, yeah, dad asked for cold soup. So that she would actually prepare what her father actually wanted, what his father actually wanted. That's the story. Rav found it here. Let's see if we can make it a little easier to see here. There we go. Rav at some point found out about this and he said, smart kid. However, he says you're doing the wrong thing. Why? Because the concept of lamdu lishonam dvarshem, it is a fundamentally problematic personality trait to teach your tongue to say words of falsehood. Teach your tongue to say words of falsehood. Don't train yourself, so to speak, to say words of falsehood. That even though your intentions are good, I don't know what the wife, what their marriage intentions was, I'll leave that aside. Your intentions are good to get your father the kind of food he wants. You shouldn't do it because it's bad personality training to allow your lips to speak falsehood. Lamdu lishonam dvar sheker. That the concept of the idea of you should not have as part of your personality the concept of the ability or the tendency to tell untruths. Now it's interesting. Rav did not quote the famous pasuk of "Thou shalt not lie" or "Midvar sheker tircha." He doesn't say that because the issue here is especially having to do with children, right? It was a father and a son, a mother and a son. And so there is this idea of the educational element that is a fundamentally bad education, especially a child as they're growing up, to accustom your tongue to say things that are not true. So I think that was also a part of it, why the idea is used lamdu lishonah. Rav Yaakov Ettlinger has a very interesting thing, and again, I think I actually have the English here that I can share with you about a similar issue, right? A similar issue. There is a question about how to give a child a katan, a lulav on the first day of Sukkot. What's the background? The background is that a person is required to own a lulav and etrog. You have to own it. The issue is that there are rules about the process of acquisition, that children are not able to fully acquire something, right? Once the child acquires it, right, minor needs to own the lulav. On the other hand, once he acquires it, he can't transfer it back because a minor can't give something away. That's topic why that's topic for a different issue. So Rabbi Yaakov Ettlinger, Derech Laner, says there's an easy answer. Give the lulav to the child, tell him it's an absolute gift, but in your mind, it shouldn't really be a gift. Seems like the perfect solution. Nobody's got to lie about anything. The kid, the minor, thinks he owns the lulav. So you've taught him about the importance of owning a lulav and following the rules of the lulav and etrog. He's being trained properly, and that's not an issue. The only problem is that at some point in the child's life, his father will have to teach him the halacha. You can't give a child a lulav. And the kid's going to ask, why didn't you do this? You gave me a lulav when I was a kid. He'll have to explain this little trick. This will teach the child that we can use trickeries in everyday transactions as long as we don't lie explicitly and we don't want to send such a message. So from an educational standpoint, it is fundamentally educationally unsound to live a role modeling life where you incorporate all sorts of white lies and trickeries into your daily activities. So you see here, the idea of truth is so fundamental. And especially when it comes to children, but I would add, as a point that can be extrapolated and expanded to others, that you somehow seem to have the conflict here between some other kind of value. We started with this question of a medical value or the issue of a peace value, and yet this ironclad concept that it is absolutely fundamentally required to make sure you always tell the truth. So again, we'll stop here because then I want to move into some examples where this actually is dealt with in the medical context that we started with, of the question of medical diagnosis, because there you have this question that on one hand, the physician, the medical practitioner, thinks that they have information, they want to either withhold it or not tell the truth about it, and we'll see some examples of that. On the other hand, how dare you lie? How dare you put yourself in a position that you know what's best for someone and not tell the truth? So we're going to have to try and grapple with that and analyze that a bit. But I'll take a break, then you just either wave or unmute, and you can ask any questions so far. Okay, let me just stop the share one more time, and then we'll get to the next source. Okay. Yes, Miriam. You're still muted. I think you need to unmute on your end. We don't hear you. I think you need to click something on your end to unmute. There you go.
Okay.
There we go. How are you?
Can we go back to Hillel and Shammai for
Sure.
one moment? Because I forgot, or perhaps I didn't hear it well, what the conclusion was about the bride. What does Hillel say and what does Shammai say?
So there's very many interpretations of the details, but basically, on a superficial and probably not totally accurate level, it sounds like Beit Shammai are saying, you regale her, but you must always be exactly truthful. Now, he doesn't say scream and saying ugly bride, but don't praise her if she's not deserving of said praise. And Hillel says, no, kala na'ava chasuda, which means praise her as the most beautiful and virtuous bride. And Beit Shammai said, one second, you're flirting with the truth here, Hillel. And Hillel said, you know what? I feel that I'm, doing something that is justified and appropriate by being so positive about this bride. Yeah, Mary.
There is such a thing, I'm not saying anything profound right now, that you withhold your saying. If you think someone is wearing an ugly dress, there's no reason in the world to say so.
Exactly. Yeah.
That does not mean you're not speaking the truth. It does mean that you're thinking of someone else's feelings.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
with
absolutely.
the truth, you always have to think of the reaction of your truth. And
right.
somebody else.
Again, there's. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, because I knew somebody who used to say, "Well, I have to be honest," and then they would say something hurtful.
Yeah, that's the.
No one asked them to. Nobody asked them to. So silence is a very good idea when it comes to something that you have to say that is hurtful. Silence is a lot better. Not saying anything very profound that we all don't know.
Right. No, and sometimes the silence isn't the option. I mean, obviously, you would say that in the Beit Shammai Beit Hillel case, silence could have been an option because of the you just don't go to the wedding. But the idea was that there was a practice that they would dance around and regale the bride. So their question is, once you're doing that, what should you say? And what we'll get to in the next case is where silence isn't an option when you're a medical practitioner, you're treating the patient. And the patient wants to know what's going on or doesn't want to know, etc. So there is a famous, Maxine, yes, go ahead.
No, I was going to say you have to use psychology.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what we learn. This might sound stupid, but that's what we learn when we keep kosher. We do it for a purpose to be kind to certain animals and plants, etc. And this is the same thing with people. you have to learn to be kind. And for a physician to, I thought the doctor with the child, I thought that was wonderful. Yeah.
He was thinking of a bigger picture, is what you're saying.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's important.
So actually, there's a famous pasuk. The famous pasuk in Kohelet. Let's see if I can bring it up here. Let's see if it can. 1 second. Let's see. Let's see if I can get it here in a way that everybody can see. But exactly what you're talking about comes in this pasuk in Kohelet, right?
Oh.
Let me see. I'm going to try and get it one more time. Here, so it's famous pasuk that says in chapter 18 of Kohelet, Ki barov chochma ravkas, and this is what we'll talk. V'yosif da'at, yosif machov. Sometimes knowing more things causes more pain. And so are there sometimes where getting more information may actually cause someone to be in more significant pain, and that's the issue that's being dealt with. So there is a very significant set of literature that tries to balance what we've been talking about up until now, where we are understanding that there is this fundamental sense of requirement of truth, and I'll add that there has to be this underlying sense of trust. Society will fall apart if you can't look somebody in the eye, especially in, let's say, a medical context, and not know that they're telling you what's actually true, right? The idea of trust is a fundamental core notion, not only to Judaism, but to any working society. You have to be able to trust when somebody says something to you that it's actually the case. And yet here, we're going to have all these different questions about, let's say, you have a physician who is worried that knowing something about their medical condition will actually be detrimental to their medical outcome. Yeah, Miriam. I think, again, you need to unmute on your end.
Rabbi?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Why does it say, Ki barov chachma rav ka'as?
Great
Why
question.
is it using the word anger?
Right. So it's a different the Mefarshim on that pasuk Kohelet have a wide gamut of really interesting understandings with the connection between wisdom and anger. And is it saying that sometimes when you learn more about something and you gain more knowledge about something, you get frustrated more because now you understand the nuances, and you sometimes having a fuller and deeper understanding can cause greater frustration.
But I'm really translating ka'as as anger, and which I believe is the correct translation. Yeah. And I don't understand why, when the Pirkei Avot gives you so many sentences on how not to be angry.
Yeah.
Whatever you do, do not be angry. First of all, you lose your own argument when you're angry.
Yeah,
that's for sure. So that's a strange. So is it actually written in Kohelet?
This is a pasuk in Kohelet, the 18th chapter.
I understand the Yosif da'at Yosif machov. Of course, the more you know, the more reason you have to be pained. But anger, I don't think fits in at all. It's only
the general translation of the Masorah is that when you purely build knowledge and wisdom without developing other parts of your personality, that's the idea. Berov, meaning when you are overwhelmed just by the thirst for knowledge, but you don't build. So, for example, that's what they say: "Kol Torah she'eni mamalacha, sofa b'tela v'goreret avot." Famous phrase in Chazal. that says that a Torah that doesn't have with it also interacting with the world is going to end up just leading to sin. Because if you only develop purely a quest for knowledge, but don't develop the parts of your personality that apply that knowledge, that interact with other people, that understand the world around you, then it's going to make you sort of reclusive and angry, as opposed to you need to. So the idea here is rov kas or rov chokhmah, when all you do is look for more knowledge and you don't expand that. Knowledge is a wonderful thing, but it needs to be balanced with expanding your, not just your chokhmah, but your binah. Right? There's different kinds of knowledge. Binah is understanding of davar mitoch davar. Right? You have to understand your rachamim. If you have to also balance it with your tvuna. All these different kinds of parts of your personality need to be balanced, and you can't go to the extreme of just rov chokhmah. That's, again, about the first half. But the second half of the pasuk is Yosef dat Yosef machal. So listen to the story of Elisha. Elisha has been newly minted as a Navi, as a speaker in the name of God, and he's traveling. And he arrives in Damascus. Right? Elisha Damascus, uben Hadad, melech Aram choleh. Ben Hadad, the king of Aram, was ill. Okay. Now, the king was told by Ish Elokim, this famous prophet Elisha, he's on his way. So what does he do? Vayomer Melech El Chazael, Kach biadcha mincha v'lech l'krat Ish Elokim v'darashta Hashem me'imo lemor ha'echeh michol izeh. He says, what I want you to do, please. This is a knower of God. Please go to Elisha. I'm sorry. Please go to Elisha. He tells Chazael, his butler or his second in command. And he says, go find out from this holy man, am I going to survive this illness or not? Vayelech Chazael likrato. Vayikach mincha be'ado kol tuvta v'neh. Gives him a great gift, and he says, Bincha ben Hadad melech Aram shlachani elecha ha'echeh michol izeh. He says, hey, Elisha, will my boss, Ben Hadad, survive? What does Elisha say? And I'm going to read the Hebrew because the Hebrew is very important here. Vayomer elav Elisha. Elisha says to him, Lechamor, go say, and here, this word is what's called a kri uktiv. A kri uktiv means it's written one way, but it's read a different way. And it's really important because the word is lo. Lo, with an aleph, means no. With a vav, like this, means to him. So the two ways of reading Elisha's response are, Vayomer elav Elisha. Elisha says to him, Lechem or lo chayot tichyeh. V'yirhani Hashem kimot yamut. Elisha tells him, tell him, you're going to die. Because God has shown me you truly will die and you will not survive this illness. In other words, Elisha says, you got to tell him the absolute and total truth. I found out that Nebuch is not going to survive this illness. So go tell him what's going to happen. What happens if you read it Lamed Vav? Then Elisha's telling him something different. Elisha is saying, go tell him he's going to live. Because that's what's really important for his medical condition. I happen to know that he's in a very terminal illness and the chances of survival are almost none. But don't tell him that. Don't tell him the accurate medical picture. Tell him that he is going to survive. I happen to know through my prophecy that he's going to pass on. But Elisha is suggesting that you should tell him something different than what I know to be true. Now, there are Mefarshim who go on this story in Melachim Bet, go in two different directions. Some Mefarshim say that's perhaps the difference between, and we talked about this in the study at the beginning of the thing, the difference between the patient and the patient's family. The patient's family, you tell them everything. The patient themselves, you think, as Maxine said, you think about the psychology of what's this going to do to impact their recovery or their illness or their will. We know so much about the fact that someone's will and desire to fight through a difficult situation is very, very impactful on whether or not they're going to actually succeed in their recovery. So the suggestion being made here is tell him what he needs to hear, even if that's not actually true. Listen to the story later in Melachim Bet. Melachim Bet, Bayamim Ahem Chalach Chizkiyahu Chizkiyahu. This is actually what started this, because we talked about this story last week. Those days, Chalach Chizkiyahu was very ill and he was going to pass away. He was deathly ill. And the Navi Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah, comes to him. And he says to him, go get your affairs in order, because you're not going to survive this illness. Now, we actually learned last week that, in fact, that Chizkiyahu said, I am going to survive, and he fought to survive, and because you should never give up hope, which is what we talked about last week. But listen to the story of the Midrash in Kohelet Rabbah. The Midrash in Kohelet Rabbah says, Amar lo Chizkiyahu l'Shiyaya. Chizkiyahu says, so the patient says to his doctor, in this case, spiritual healer, Yishaya, doc, Navi, but no Ba'olam. The normal way when you have in the world is Adam Sholich Baker de Choleh, when someone goes to visit somebody who's ill, Omer lo min hashamayim yirachmu lecha. What do you say? You pray that the person succeed. You pray that the person have a refuah shlema. V'arofei etzlo olech etzlo v'omer lo milta ploni echol milta ploni lo techol. Or what does the doctor say? The doctor purely gives directive. Eat this food. Don't eat that food. Take this medicine. Don't take that medicine. Hadein tishtev, hadein lo tishtev. Drink this. Don't drink that. V'afilu shira oten natel amoy lamot. And even if you feel the person very, very ill, you know that telling him what the severity of his illness will cause him will cause him to have a weakening. How dare you speak to me that way? Don't tell me the truth. That's what Chizkiyahu said. Don't tell me the truth. Because what's that going to do? It's going to make me less likely to be successful in my desire to feel better. And the Rabbi Zilberstein, who we quoted last week, also talks about the question of, does this have an impact? Maybe the person won't pray anymore. Well, maybe you shouldn't actually tell them the full extent of their illness and their diagnosis or their prognosis. But listen to what happened, the story of Moshe Sternbach. Moshe Sternbach had a situation where a doctor asked him, says, I have a patient who has a very serious illness. And I have been treating this patient for many years. And I know about this patient's psychological state that if they find out the nature of their illness, they're simply going to give up hope. And they find out that they have cancer, they're going to give up hope and not fight it. And I know that this cancer is curable, but only if they have the right attitude and they have the right focus and they are aggressive and doing all the treatments as they should. And I know this patient, once I say that word cancer, they will not take the right path and they won't have a good outcome. And so he adds, so what happened? I went to talk to this patient and the patient said, Doc, swear to me that I don't have cancer. And so the doctor was torn. He says, if I tell him he has cancer, I know in my heart that that's going to kill him. But I can't swear falsely. And so the doctor says what he did was, he says, I never use the term swearing when I talk about medical things. Nobody knows medicine. Only God knows. That's how he got out of it. But he was asking in that situation, when the knowledge, I feel, will kill the guy. what do I do? And the reality played out as it played out, and there are no answers here because you definitely have to take into account patient autonomy, people's mindset and their viewpoint about knowing their full information about what they want to know. Then you have on the other hand people like Chizkiyahu, who says, don't tell me the truth. Come and do a real Bikur Cholim visit and tell me what I want to hear, or at least what's good for me to hear, and that will actually help success in my treatment. So again, this has no resolution that we're going to get to, but I think the concept is a very inspiring one, which is that we grapple with this issue, that we struggle, and that we know that we have such ironclad values as truth, but we also have the ironclad value of peace. We have the ironclad value of your concept of autonomy and understanding and what you are, entitled to. We also have the concept of pikuach nefesh and caring about the mental well-being of the other person. So again, I'm not going to come to any conclusions one way or the other. These are points to analyze to get to that question of what is the ideals. And the ideals, I think, are very powerful and inspiring to know that these are what we think about when we try to make the right decision. It's not always easy to make the right decision, but I think it's valuable to see what we struggle with and grapple with when we try and make these decisions. All right, I'll open up if anybody else has questions, and otherwise we'll reconnect next week.